Welcome, everyone, to this week's weekly show of the Independent Medical Alliance. I'm Dr. Ryan Cole, Senior Fellow with the IMA, and we are so grateful to have so many people joining us, not from just around the country, but from around the world tonight. Tonight's conversation really couldn't be more timely. We're in the throes of legislative sessions all around the United States, and many states are stepping up, introducing legislation to restore medical choice, to protect the doctor-patient relationship, and push back against one-size-fits-all healthcare mandates. The growing momentum has come together under what's called the Medical Freedom Act Coalition. It's a coordinated state effort to reclaim informed consent, medical autonomy, and constitutional limits on government overreach in healthcare. I am tickled and honored and privileged to be joined tonight by two of the leaders at the center of this movement, both just heroes in their own right. Tonight joining me is Leah Wilson, Esquire. She is the executive director and the co-founder of Stand for Health Freedom. And I'm also honored to be joined by my fellow Idahoan and true hero as well, Leslie Manookian. She's the president and founder of the Health Freedom Defense Fund. And together tonight, we're going to unpack basically what the Medical Freedom Act Coalition is, which states are taking action this year during the 2026 legislative sessions, where those bills currently stand, why the states, not Washington, D.C., are where the fight is being decided, and hopefully to give a groundwork and a guide for people in other nations as well to try to enact these type of measures within their governmental structures. So I'll kind of start with the big picture here. When people hear Medical Freedom Act Coalition, what does that actually mean? How did this come together? And we're going to kind of frame it in this way. We're going to go over the origins of the coalition, basically the core belief, because this is multiple organizations that have come together to try to accomplish what we're doing. And we'll go over the framework and how it works state by state, the shared principles across the states, and the toolkits that the coalition has developed, and why a unified legislative framework matters. So these are the organizations on the screen that you can see on the graphic that have come together in this amazing effort. And let's start with you, Leslie. How did all of this get started? Can you kind of discuss the amazing efforts and the work you put into here in Idaho, getting the Medical Freedom Act passed, where that stands, and how it's basically set a framework for where we're going with these amazing groups together?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. So I started to realize that medical freedom was something that we all needed to care about 25 years ago when I first learned that there even was a vaccine debate. I had no idea that there was any kind of a debate or controversy until I enrolled in homeopathy school. And once I did that, I started to learn about this unbelievable holistic medicine. And then I heard the very first day that there's a controversy, and someone gave me a book. I read that. 10 years later, I made an award-winning documentary on it called The Greater Good. And through this whole period of my life, I was just learning more and more about the importance of us being able to direct our own medical care. And then when 2020 unfolded, I couldn't believe what was happening. The different steps had been put in place at a legislative level for more than 20 years to ensure that the federal government and state health departments and governors would be able to access essentially limitless power in the event of a public health outbreak or public health emergency. And that's what we all witnessed. And so I decided I had to do something about it. And I founded Health Freedom Defense Fund. And then after watching the blowback from all of the overreach that occurred during those years, I started to think, you know what, maybe it's time. Maybe Idaho and the legislature are ready for going a little bit further than they have in the past. And so what happened was the state of Idaho passed a bill called the Coronavirus Stop Act, which outlawed mandates of the coronavirus shots. And I thought, well, if they can do that, why can't we ban all medical interventions in the state of Idaho? And so I met with a legislator, told him what my idea was, and he said, if you write the bill, I'll carry it if I like it. And so I literally hung up the phone with him and started writing the bill. And basically what the bill does is it just enshrines medical freedom for almost all Idahoans. So it prohibits any kind of mask, test, pill, cream, injection, medication, device, chip, like everything we could possibly think of is prohibited in the state for almost all Idahoans. And I say all Idahoans because we had to carve out people who work in the medical profession because of a Supreme Court case and because the federal government ties receipt of federal funding to vaccination status. It used to until Secretary Kennedy broke that, stopped that. And so basically we got this landmark legislation passed, which protects the right of all Idahoans to make their own medical choices free of any kind of coercion or penalty for those choices. So no public or private entity can force you to take a medical intervention in order to live a normal life. And I mean, I can't think of anything more wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. And I like also within that act that you can't be discriminated against in public settings, restaurants, concerts, all those things that we saw during the last several years. People can't be excluded because of their medical status from participating basically in society. And I think that was another amazing accomplishment that you were able to get through in the act. What was the core in terms of communicating what you were trying to accomplish, and how can we carry that forward in other states?
Did you say what was the core in communicating?
Yeah, what was the core messaging?
Yeah, sure. So to me, there's nothing more basic or fundamental. We all talk about the First Amendment, right? The First Amendment protects the right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religious expression, and freedom to petition the government for any kind of wrong. So petition the federal government for redress for any kind of violation, okay? These things are there. The Ninth Amendment specifically says that anything not that rights that Americans possess are not all enumerated, that they're not all here, that we still have all sorts of rights. So if you think about the Declaration of Independence, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Ninth Amendment to the Constitution specifically says that even if a right is not enumerated, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And people need to understand that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are a restraint on the federal government and the state governments, not on the people. The 10th Amendment specifically restricts or reserves to the states all the rights all the powers that are not expressly delegated to the federal government in the Constitution. And where I'm going with all of this is that there is nothing more basic or fundamental than the right to make and direct your own medical choices. And it's not expressly enumerated in the Constitution, but it doesn't need to be, because there's nothing more basic. And I mean, I'm in a position, and I think most of us would agree, that who cares really if you have the right to freedom of expression, of religion, or to freedom of speech if you don't have the right to dictate your own medical interventions. And so the way that we have framed this is as the most basic and just basic and fundamental of human rights. That's what this really is. The most basic human right is the right to make our own medical choices. And I think it's very, very hard for anyone to argue against that. So that's the core message, that we and we alone have the moral authority, the knowledge of our own medical history, and then have to live with the consequences of our medical choices. And therefore, this is the only moral decision. And that's why this is common sense legislation. So that was kind of the core of the messaging. And I think it resonated very deeply with the legislators after they had experienced themselves the overreach during the COVID years.
Yeah, and based on all of that, I love when we go back to the founding documents that it basically states, look, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and reserving those rights to the individual. I mean, I'm wearing my We the People tie tonight for a reason, because it goes back to the individual citizen. Now, Leah, this is part of your expertise in the legal realms. In terms of what Idaho's accomplished, what inspired you to join the coalition, and how are things going so far? And what states have basically joined the coalition or are introducing opportunities to match what we've done in Idaho? And okay, I'll stop at that, because I could tack on too many questions. So So how's this rolling forward from your point of view, Leah?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dr. Cole. I appreciate it. And Leslie is such a beautiful example of being constitutionally literate. I mean, she didn't go to law school, but she's an American citizen. She's an Idaho citizen, and she has constitutional literacy. And that's what we need for our kids. We have people ask us all the time, well, when are you going to support a constitutional amendment? And I'm like, we don't need it. The Constitution already protects us. And if you don't know it and you can't use it to protect you, then how is it going to help to add another clause that you still don't know and you still don't know how to use to protect yourself? And so it was beautiful to see what Leslie was able to accomplish, because groups like ours, like Stand for Health Freedom, have been working for years to repeal vaccine mandates. It oftentimes took the shape of protecting exemptions because that was our current tool. And then we went after the civil rights angle, and then we went after the discrimination angle. And what Leslie accomplished protects all people, not because you are a super minority or because you're disenfranchised, but simply because you have a birthright. And you asked, what's the message here? And the message that we have run with is no one and no government has the right or authority to tell us what we should put in our bodies. And that's really the crux of all of this. This is not a scientific debate, because we all know that science has divergent approaches and opinions, and that there's never going to be truly scientific consensus. And therefore, it falls on the person to know how to best care for themselves, or not even to know, but have the right to best care for themselves. Because as a person, you get to choose how educated you are, or how opinionated you are about your health, or how much you outsource that authority to your doctor or to another authority. But ultimately, the right to do so, to care for yourself, to nurture your children, must stay with the individual. And I'll tell you a short story.
Please.
After COVID, we started getting more and more questions from everyday moms and dads and teachers and in the communities that we serve, saying, we never knew that we could tell our pediatrician that we wanted to opt out. And you're like, what? Like, this is a professional thinking woman who honestly just did not know that she could say, I don't want the recommended shots today. And it was, striking to us who have been educating on this issue for decades to understand that still in 2026, there are several mothers and fathers that came to us directly saying they wish they would have known that there was a decision to be made. And that's what we want for our communities, is that every healthcare decision is with the individual and their chosen provider, and that there's not a third party in the exam room, like a school mandate or a state lawmaker or the CDC, and you as a doctor can speak to that. To honor the Hippocratic Oath, you're caring for the patient in front of you, not with consideration of the public welfare of, an edict coming from the state legislature or the state Department of Health or the local school district. And that's what we want to accomplish for as many states as possible, is to restore those healthcare rights, those medical rights, to make each and every medical decision without coercion or repercussion.
And I love that you both brought up the Constitution, and to my recollection, and enjoying the study of the Constitution here in the United States. If I remember correctly, the Constitution has never been suspended. And, other than, there was habeas corpus under Lincoln for a brief window, but the principle of both the Ninth and 10th Amendments are there. And I love also that you bring up, Leah, the sacred doctor-patient relationship. And again, it is up to the patient to know how much they want to know before they go to their doctor, but that's informed consent. And the patient has that right to be informed before undertaking any medical procedure of any sort. And then I think the other important thing in what we're all trying to accomplish here is shielding clinicians from retaliation. Unfortunately, we've seen patients retaliated against when they don't want that full childhood schedule, and organizations have encouraged their doctors to fire patients from their practice, which is beyond absurd and violates the oath that we've taken in medicine. But I love that you're standing up for the individual right of the patient and their right to know. So in all these legislative efforts, and I'll throw this out to both of you, what is the counter to the legislation that we've seen in many states so far? What are we hearing from the opposing side as to why mandates are necessary or why medical freedom is not a good idea? What are some of the arguments that you're both hearing from the other side? We'll start with you, Leslie, and then I'll bounce back over to you, Leah.
I'm kind of laughing because it was so hilarious to see to hear some of the things that the legislators who opposed the Medical Freedom Act actually stated. First of all, I just have to say a huge shout out to you, Dr. Ryan Cole, because you testified and you were there all along, and it was not just me. It was you and our colleagues, Misty Karlfeld and Sarah Clendenin here in Idaho, and an incredibly supportive legislature that made the Idaho Medical Freedom Act happen. The governor vetoed the bill the first time, and then both chambers of the legislature brought back competing bills and basically forced his hand. And so, it was very much, and it was also a 15-year enterprise. It didn't just happen last year. It's something that I had been working on for a very long time. So just want to say that.
Not to interrupt, but I want to highlight that point, Leslie, because you bring up such a great point. Just because it doesn't happen in certain states this year doesn't mean don't try it again. And that's such an important point. So many pieces of legislation take many rounds to make it to the floor. So thank you for bringing that point up. Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I've been working on this kind of stuff for more than 15 years. And sometimes it takes that long to really build relationships with your legislators. You want them to know that what you tell them is reliable, that you understand, it's factual and all these things. And once they do, they will look to you for guidance. They will ask you, what's your opinion on this next bill? What's your opinion on this? Should we change this language? And so this is something about, if you meet with your legislators in the off session, you can really start to develop these relationships. And over time, it will come to, it will actually bear fruit. So
absolutely.
In terms of what happened, oh my gosh. So I had the unbelievable privilege and honor of presenting the bill in committee in both the Senate and the House. And I had some legislators say things to me like, well, what about polio? Do you want to bring polio back? And so then I would explain to them that actually countries that never used the polio shot actually saw a decline in the incidence of polio in their countries as well. And that the actual, that they changed the diagnostic criteria for polio in this country, coincident with launch of the vaccination, in order to make it look like the cases went down when they actually hadn't really. They had just changed the way that they had diagnosed it. The other thing we got huge comments on, which made me laugh out loud, literally from the podium, was we had a legislator say, well, what about super lice?
I remember that. Yes. Super lice. Yes.
I was like, super lice? Is that a thing? I didn't even know what it was. I'd never heard of it. And we just kept telling her, listen, there's nothing in this bill that prevents a school from sending home a sick child or a child with lice. What you can't dictate is how the parent treats the child. And so there are homeopathic remedies. There are naturopathic remedies. There are all different ways. There are antibiotics. Maybe that's why we have super lice, is because they've been using a drug rather than a natural approach to it. But this is the point is that the parent gets to decide how to treat the condition. Same thing with conjunctivitis. So she said, well, what about pink eye? Can children be sent home when they have pink eye? And I said, well, of course they can, and I said, but listen, what you can't do is insist that the child receive antibiotics for that. And I said, and I wouldn't want to give my child antibiotics for that. And I didn't. In fact, I cured, I'm not supposed to say that because I'm not a doctor, but I cured conjunctivitis, pink eye in my son overnight with a homeopathic remedy. That's the simple truth. And so my point is, they will bring up all of these different things. And if you actually know your stuff, you will know that there are many, many approaches to most maladies, and that all this does is prevent the state, the public enterprise, or a private enterprise, a business, from directing or insisting or mandating how you treat a situation. That's it. So it just preserved the right of the individual to decide how they're going to address some kind of malady that arises, and also how they're going to keep themselves well.
Amen. What's some of the pushback you've heard, Leah?
It's funny because right now going into 2026, where we have a lot of these bills dropping, the lawmakers honestly want to know what's popular with the voters and what they're going to get rewarded for or punished for, quite frankly. But the fact that we can say that Idaho has done this successfully and that there has not been a court challenge to the statute is huge, because that's one of the first questions you always get when you sit down in front of a lawmaker is, who has done this and what happened afterward? Did it help? Was there a backlash? So the fact that we can say, look, Idaho is not having major outbreaks. They're not reporting polio outbreaks, even though they changed this law. And they're like, oh, they're not. And neither is the UK. Neither are the other countries that don't require these shots for school or mandated for healthcare workers, because those are the two main populations that are affected outside of a pandemic. It's
Absolutely.
the hospital workers, those in the medical industry, and students in K through 12 and in college education. And so we can look at the impact and effects of the Idaho bill and the other peer nations to show them that this is a free market approach, and that when there is a really good solution to a really bad problem, uptake stays high, that people are going to choose what's best for them simply because that's what happens in the free market, and that we can trust that if there's a good lice solution, that they will use the lice solution. It's like we can't dictate what should happen. And I heard a new one this last week. It wasn't from a lawmaker, it was from the press, but they want to know, and I would love to know what you would say, Dr. Cole, to this question, but they wanted to know, what are you going to do when kids get high fevers and they don't know if meningitis is circulating? They were afraid that we would have to spinal tap every child that gets a high fever just to make sure they won't die within 48 hours of meningitis. And I was like, gosh, the fear that we have sold these parents of fevers, of meningitis, without them even knowing what's circulating. And I would love to hear what you would say to a question like that.
Well, number one, fever is natural. Fever is the body's response to any infectious insult, be it bacterial or other. Your immune system functions 3 times faster when you have a fever. Once you get up to a certain point, then you do try to lower the fever, and there's ways to do that with certain medicines, or there's ways to do it naturally. But those who let a fever run for a window of time actually get better faster. And then meningitis, that's usually only in either college dorm settings and or in military barracks settings. So we don't see it commonly in school-age children. Not that it doesn't happen, don't get me wrong. But to mandate a procedure or a spinal tap is an absurdity. And that goes back to the individual doctor-patient relationship. Every patient is unique and different. And I think this is why the entire medical freedom coalition is so important, because what the system and the pharmaceutical industry has tried to do is a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody. And we're all such unique biological humans that to apply one thing to everyone is a scientific absurdity. So, it's a good question. What do you do in a scenario like that? Well, when there are outbreaks, look, I ran a laboratory for decades. There are mandatory reporting requirements in states when you see an outbreak of certain types of diseases. So there is a role for health agencies to monitor and know what's happening in their communities, but there isn't a role for them to mandate what has to happen in those scenarios. So each community is unique demographically. Each community is unique in terms of those types of outbreaks. And do we need a disease monitoring system? Sure. But then we need to prudently say, okay, now it's up to you as the patient with your doctor to decide what's best for you as the individual. So it's a valid question. I can see where they're coming from, but at the same time to say now, okay, we see this, we're going to mandate it. That's where rights come into play. And that's why what you gals are doing, and we at the IMA joining with you, find this so important, is to bring that back to that individual level. So, what are you seeing?
Can I
Please,
interject
please do. Yes.
on that? Because I think it's so, I'm actually a qualified homeopath. After I left Wall Street, that was the thing I did next. And then I made the film. And, we have a saying in the holistic healing arts that fever is your friend, and that it's the body's natural response to some kind of a condition, and that it's raising your fever in order to fight back. And so bringing it down is actually not supporting the body's natural approach to it. And there's an amazing book that was written by Dr. Robert Mendelsohn. If people haven't read it, they really should get it. It is just a gold mine. I read that a long time ago, and it's called How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor. And he talks all about how we should be looking at, not to in any way denigrate doctors. There are so many great ones, but let's be honest, there are a lot of them who are not our friend. But that, basically most of these things, the mother knows best. And that fevers, unless it's due to some kind of a chemical or toxic insult, they're self-limiting. In fact, it's a good thing, not a bad thing. And so, just reading this kind of stuff is really, I think it helps to put your mind at ease as a parent. Learning some homeopathy is, it really helps too. Then you're not afraid. And then you start to realize that you want to work with the body, not against the body. I had a family member who was taking some kind of a, fever reducer over and over again. And she kept having a fever every single night for like 10 days. I said, well, what are you doing? And then once they told me, I was like, well, stop that. Get the fever and let it actually burn out, run its course, and then you'll be fine. And that's what happened over the next 24 hours. So it's really interesting. Like, there's so many different perspectives on this. And I have to say one last thing, which is that your child is more likely to suffer injury or death from the meningitis vaccine than they are from meningitis. That's how dangerous that injection is.
Yeah, statistically true. What are we seeing so far in different states? You're in Indiana, right, Leah? That's home base
Yes,
for
I
you.
am. And I love what Leslie said, mothers know best. That is the
Amen.
core of this. Like, we are declaring the era of medical mandates is over, and that we are re-entering the era where a mother is held in high regard as the voice of wisdom and authority and how to care for her own child.
Amen. Yeah, and yeah, don't get in the way of a child and the mama bear. That's absolutely true. And fathers out there, step up. Come on, guys. But so, are we seeing progress in other states this legislative session? I know some states have brought some legislation forward. I know it's stalled in certain committees in some states. What are we seeing with this coalition, and what are the hopes to come?
Yeah, so in January, beginning of February, we saw 8 bills drop, which is very significant. It shows a strong legislative trend to see these medical freedom acts being filed at the state level. And we've had 2 of those states already have hearings. So committee hearings, you have to go to the committee of the first chamber in most states before you move to a whole floor vote, and then go to the other chamber. Some states it's a parallel process, but so we're getting some hearings, which is positive. We also have some really strong authors, doctor authors, which gives a lot of credence to the policy solution to have doctors saying this is what is moral and ethical for our state, that we need to repeal longstanding public health policy in the interest of my patients and our state. And so it's been encouraging to see the quality of policy efforts that are happening in states like Idaho is strengthening their bill even more. You all could speak to that. South Carolina, New Hampshire has a strong effort going. Arizona has a strong effort going. Oklahoma is still trying to get energy behind that one. Sadly, Indiana, my state, had a great bill with a phenomenal bill author. And we had a very short session, and we were not able to pull off getting the chairman to schedule it for a committee hearing before the deadline. But the bill was fantastic. He even took it a step further than our model bill to basically make one of my dreams come true, which is to call unwanted medical interventions medical battery. That this is a sacred right, and that there will be repercussions for a doctor forcing medical intervention, which honestly, friends, is probably one of the next steps, because as we see the gift of distinct opinions from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, it shows the world that scientific consensus was an illusion, and that there's more than one approach to these types of problems and decisions and recommendations. But what is lagged right now is standard of care in the hospital setting. So even though there's a recognition that there can be divergent or distinct standards of care, these doctors are still bullying parents to fall in line with the mainstream standard of care. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And what we're seeing with the energy behind the Medical Freedom Act is promising, and it's something to be excited about. And if you go to StandForHealthFreedom.com and sign up to receive our action alerts, we make sure that if there is a good bill in your state that you can support and contact the right person at the right time, we'll get that in front of you so that you can use your voice there too.
And how do citizens get involved? I love that you bring that up. I think that's such an important point.
Mm-hmm. So because these laws about medical mandates are a state issue, we primarily work by supporting our state partners on the ground. So we have 46 state partnerships with individual organizations that are doing great work in their state houses, where we can come alongside them and help with communications and calls to action and broadening their reach. And so if you are looking to get more involved, then we would love to connect you with the state organization that we work with in your own state. You can also make sure that you open our emails and find out, because we will send emails to you specifically when something's going on in your state or your district. And you open that up and you read what's going on. And normally, more often than not, there's an opportunity to take action. And that action oftentimes results in a conversation back and forth with your lawmaker. So you find out, what questions do they have? What interests do they have? How can you build a rapport with them so that next time you have a need, you can take it to them? So it's a powerful tool to start a conversation with your lawmaker about an issue that you care about deeply.
And I like that you bring that up. Getting to know your legislators. I think most of us don't realize these aren't magicians. These are just human beings that live in a normal house in the neighborhood down the street, that they're just people too. And a lot of these concerns that we're trying to codify, look, they're parents as well, and they have medical questions as well. And to build those relationships of trust in a kind, decent rapport is so important to get involved. And I kudos to Leslie, because over the years she's done exactly that. And again, do we get it all done right away? No. Is that frustrating? You know, does the best NBA player hit every free throw? Of course not. But they go back to the line and keep trying again. And I think this is an important message that needs to resonate is, look, we're not going to get everything done all at once. But why are we doing this at a state level instead of a federal level, in both of your opinions?
Mm-hmm. Well, Leslie spoke to this a little bit about any power that is not expressly delegated to the states and or to the federal government. The Constitution is reserved to the states. And one of those that's reserved to the states is public health and welfare. So when you look at things such as school vaccine mandates, those are all in state statute. School vaccine mandates are not coming from HHS or the CDC or the federal government. They're coming from your state General Assembly or your state Department of Health. And so that's why, to undo mandates that are on the books, we have to appeal to our state lawmakers to help us change that. And it's a good question, because even when we sit down with people who are very high up in the state house, they have that same question. They're like, well, Leah, if we fix this for you, is it really going to be fixed, or is the federal government going to trump what we're doing? We're like, good news. This falls squarely on your plate. It is yours to fix. We, here in Indiana, I think we uncovered, I don't want to misquote, but it was like more than 35 areas of our code that currently have medical mandates. We're like, here's the list. We're going to repeal them all, and then we'll make a prohibition on future mandates going forward. And so that's the kind of work that we do with our state partners is to take our model Medical Freedom Act and then identify what we're fixing in that specific state.
Fantastic. Leslie, any comments?
Yeah. So people will probably remember back in April of 2022 when the mask mandate was defeated on planes, trains, and buses. That was our organization, Health Freedom Defense Fund. And the reason I bring it up is that one of the reasons that we won that case is because the CDC is not empowered or authorized in any way to interfere in the private medical lives of individual Americans. And the judge recognized that and struck it down, vacated the rule. And this just reinforces. So CDC can come up with a recommended vaccination schedule. CDC cannot mandate. What happens is they make their recommended schedule, and then the states decide what they're going to implement or not implement. And they do things like incentivize, like send billions of dollars to state health departments, which is why those state health departments come down so hard and push these things so much. But the point is that the only place we actually can do this work is at the state level, because that's what the Constitution says. And so not only must we, can we do it there, we must do it there. And these lawmakers just need to understand that they are empowered to do this. They may not realize it, but they are. And so that's, super exciting. And I just want to make one other comment on this, which is I really, truly believe that this is the issue of our day. And something that illustrates that for me is that I have never seen in the 20 plus years that I've been in the health freedom arena, seen 15 organizations come together singularly focused on one issue. And that's getting the Medical Freedom Act passed. That was how we were able to create the Medical Freedom Act Coalition. After getting the Medical Freedom Act passed in Idaho last year, I had literally all these people coming up to me saying, I want to help. What can we do? How do we do it in our state? And thankfully, I had been partnering with Leah and her team for months to create a model bill. And then I wrote 2 sort of support packets, one for grassroots and one for legislators, so they would understand basically the points of the bill and how to do this in their own states. But we basically perfected it. And then I literally just started calling up all these people who had said that they were interested. And we have 15 organizations behind this because it's common sense and because it's the issue of our day. Americans want freedom. In fact, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but this just came out the other day. Last week, I think it was. It was a survey asking Americans whether or not they want insurance companies or the federal government involved in their medical choices. And 70 to 80% of people across the country said, we want the government, federal government, and the insurance companies out of our lives. We want this power and this authority returned to the individual. And I think that just completely reinforces what we're trying to do. This is a huge issue. We are riding on a huge wave of public support, and we are going to do that. If we don't succeed in every state this year, we'll go for it again next year, thanks to all the support that we have from all of the other organizations who have basically linked arms with us. It's just so fantastic and exciting and inspiring. I just am so grateful and feel so blessed to be working with all of them,
And I love that you bring that point up, because there's so much infighting between different groups from time to time. But really, if we sit down at the table together, we agree on 70, 80, 90% of points. And just because we disagree or have a different understanding on one thing, it doesn't mean we can't work together. And this is such a great example of so many disparate groups coming together saying, look, this is an issue of this time. And it is an issue about the future of a nation. So goes the health of a nation, so goes the nation. And so this is such an important aspect. And to share some insider information, having been in DC multiple times in the last several months, working on different policy issues and whatnot, meeting with someone very high up in one of the legislative bodies, they said, look, we could try to do certain things at the federal level, but the states have to do it because, like you said, it is a states' rights issue. But also they said there's not enough courage in Washington to get certain things done. And courage begets courage. And so what you accomplished here in Idaho with that amazing team has begat courage to other states and other teams. And Leah has been fundamental in this and bringing these groups together with you as well, Leslie. And we are setting the example for the federal government to lay off the individual and remind them that they work for us, we don't work for them, that all of our constitutional principles, both on a federal and a state level, are there to protect the individual, not the governing entity. And so courage does beget courage, and the feds want to see the states succeed. They've said that from the halls of Washington. They said, please keep doing what you're doing. We want to see the states succeed. And this is a call to action for everybody. And again, no one person is going to get anything done, but all of us together doing our part and getting that voice out there is so resonant and is such a good example for our leaders who are actually our fellow citizens to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments, Leah?
And we have heard exactly that, Dr. Cole. What does Secretary Kennedy think we should do as a state? And so we get to engage in that conversation of what is going to make the biggest difference. How do we support HHS in turning around the health of our nation? And putting healthcare back in the hands of the individual is a primary way to do that. And, Stand for Health Freedom was birthed out of pushback to a medical mandate. Our family, we fostered children in our home, and they wouldn't let us take our next placement because our sons didn't have all the CDC recommended vaccines. And I said, this, as an attorney and a natural healthcare health center owner, I know this doesn't make sense. So we need to shine a light on common sense so that public health policy can serve these foster children, not get in the way of them having a home. So when we built this voting block, our one commitment was, if you join us and you use your voice for these policies, our commitment to you is that our issue will stay squarely in the lane of, you are the one that gets to take care of your own health and the health of your children. You get to make those decisions. And just in 2025, the first 6 months of 2025, we welcomed 360,000 new health freedom advocates to Stand for Health Freedom. And it shows that the American people are behind this and that this is a popular issue, and the people want to see, like you said, Leslie, the government and the insurance companies out of their medical decisions. And so that's our promise to the coalition, to the people, is that we are here to restore this fundamental right and to do it together, because we have strength in numbers. This is a David versus Goliath fight. We don't have the industry's power. We don't have the industry's pull, but we do have the strength in standing together and voting according to our conscience.
Well, and 194 nations were influenced by just a few industries to do all the exact same things all at once. And yet it was groups like Leslie's that, and I'm eternally grateful for this, getting those masks taken off the airplanes, because I was traveling a lot at that time. And to be able to say, look, we're not beholden to pharma or some hospital or some health agency. We're beholden to ourselves, and our children are our guard, or our responsibility. We're there to guard them. And so what these groups coming together, trying to accomplish this, it's such an important part of freedom. And if we don't get it done this year, please don't give up, folks. We'll try again next year and next year and next year until we do get it done, because this is an issue of the time, and it is an issue of freedom. Leslie, any other comments before we go to audience questions?
Yeah, I saw one question that I want to answer, but also I just want to say that Leah and I have received so many requests from the legacy media, the conflicted corporate legacy media, in the last 2 weeks. It's incredible. And that tells me that the corporate world is very afraid of what we're doing, and that we are over the target. And so I just want every single person watching this to really stand in their power and own that they get to make these choices, that if you don't get to make these choices, then you're a slave. That's the truth, right? And as I said in the opening, I mean, I care not if I can speak, if someone can forcibly inject something into me. Like, then I'm just chattel, right? And so this is just so important to think about that. And I feel like we are riding on a huge wave, and you see that because they are pushing back. They are afraid, very afraid of what we're doing. And I take that as a really, really positive sign and really encouraging. Yeah. And the other thing is, someone asked about specifically about the Idaho bill. The Idaho bill removes the exclusion, the carve out for medical workers, meaning that we want medical workers in Idaho to have the same rights as everybody else. And the right now, the bill has been printed, and Chairman, what's his name, Vander Wada, he's the chairman of the House Health and Welfare Committee. He needs a little nudge, maybe. So if you're in Idaho, find out how to get a hold of him. Just go to the Idaho Legislative website and contact him and say, please hear the new Idaho Medical Freedom Act bill, the expansion bill.
Wonderful. And I think that's a great point you bring up too, is we have allies in these legislatures. We may not have majorities in all of the legislatures, but we do have allies in these legislatures. And if you don't like what your legislature is doing, run for office, get involved, run for your health board, get involved in terms of being a decision maker in terms of policy on your school board, or start at that lower grassroots level. Many of us are very reluctant, accidental volunteers in this fight because of what we've all gone through over the years. And everybody listening, everybody has a story and everybody has an experience. And to see the example of what both of you have done from your personal life experiences and said, wait a minute, if this can happen, who's going to do something about it? And you both stepped up and said, well, I am. And that's exceedingly admirable. And there are so many people in this audience, and this will go out to thousands upon thousands of people. Courage begets courage. What you've both done is exceedingly courageous, but it's also common sense. And there's so many common sense people out there that see the jig is up, and we don't have to put up with government overreach anymore. And so for what you've both done and what you're both continuing to do, the IMA is just grateful to be in this coalition with you and stand with you with all of our members as well. And we'll continue to fight together. Now, I do see that Autumn has popped onto my screen, which means here are the audience questions. We've got time for a few of these. So I'll be quiet and let Autumn question us, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. I'll just jump right into it. Adele asked, can you guys discuss how public policy can better reconcile the individual's right to bodily autonomy to the greater community interests in the event of a true, not contrived pandemic?
Mm-hmm. So you heard us talk earlier that the Constitution has not been suspended, and there's recognition from our founding fathers that the Constitution was written for times of emergency, for times when there would be temptation for overreach. Because you, as a human, know that if we are in an emergency, then we need to be firing on all cylinders to best take care of ourselves. Like, freedom is never more important than when you need to be sharp and ready to take action and decide what is good and what is not. It's crazy to see the legislative responses to just give wholesale product liability shields during times of emergency, because that's when we need more accountability, more truthfulness. We are riper for abuse and, taking advantage of us in a time of emergency than any other time. So that's when freedom is most important. And that's when people will truly go to bat for themselves and their own family to make good decisions. If there's a good product, then the market will decide for itself if it should be used.
A question from Laura Chamberlain. She asked, Leslie, will you go now and remove the exemption for healthcare workers? Are you interested in doing anything for healthcare workers that are under these mandates?
As I mentioned just a minute ago, yes, the bill that is in the Health and Welfare Committee, it's been printed, it's just awaiting a hearing, removes the carve out for healthcare workers. So that's something we want, and we're doing this year. And we need as many. I just posted what the Idaho bill number is, HB 574. Contact the chairman and ask him to give the bill a hearing. If you are a medical worker in the state of Idaho, bombard him, please. right? So he needs to know. And I also just have to say that the public health issue, people talk about this all the time, and they ask this question. Here's the thing. There's public health should address the commons, I believe. It should be sanitation and sewage and drinking water and air and effluent. That's what that should be addressing. But somehow in recent decades, it's been understood to intrude into the personal, private medical decisions of the individual. And there's a difference between public health and personal health. And I don't think that any human being has the moral authority to tell any other human being what to do with their bodies, what to put into it, how to keep themselves well, or anything like that, or how to treat it when they're ill. And so I think it's wrong. No vaccine actually stops all of these things. They talk about measles, right? And there's hyping all the measles outbreaks. Well, we are 4% of the world population, and we have about 0.25% of the, that's if I remember correctly, of the measles cases in the world right now. And they're trying to make you think that there's this huge epidemic, and it's just not the case. And even if every single human being was vaccinated with measles, it wouldn't matter, because there's what you call primary vaccine failure. 6 to 7% of vaccinees will never ever mount an immune response. That's just the simple truth. And then another percent within 20 years will have zero immunity from the shot. And so there are millions, tens of millions of adults walking around the United States right now who have no protection, and we're not seeing outbreaks. But the point is that nobody knows your medical background. Nobody has to live with your medical choices. Public health should not intrude into the personal, private medical domain, in my view. Public health is made up of individuals, right? I mean, this whole notion that it's okay to sacrifice some or force some people to risk their own lives. That's a real risk when you take an injection that injures and kills people. And you are being asked to risk your own life in service to a theoretical good of society.
And that violates every principle of medical ethics to force I don't wear my parka so you don't get cold. I mean, just common sense things. So yeah, great point. And don't forget, in many of these states, religious exemptions are still valid. So even if you are a healthcare worker, if it violates your personal religious principle, even if it isn't yet codified in state legislation, you still have that right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had an anonymous attendee ask about California and the mandated vaccines to attend public schools, and asking if it has changed. I live in California, so I know it has not changed, but the removal of those religious exemptions is quite unfortunate and something that we hope to change. Another question that we got from Ellen O, asking if some of the recent bills passed, if they could be Trojan horses for digital ID. The ones that she referenced was the SAVE Act, Voter ID, Clarity, Genius Act. Can you discuss how this could interact with medical freedom? Do any of you have any thoughts on that?
I do, but I'll let my guests. I have a lot of thoughts. That could be an entire show. I'll let the guests comment, and I'll reserve my comments for now.
Go for it, Leah.
Yeah. So can you name the acts again? The SAVE Act. I guess it's probably not relevant, but digital ID is one of our top 5 battles right now. So at Stand for Health Freedom, we always have 5 battles that we are vigilant and dedicated to with our time and our resources and the action alerts. And digital ID is one of them. And we are seeing Trojan horses pop up every day at all level of government, not just in the federal, but also the state, and sometimes even at the local level. So it's something we're actively hedging against and educating on in the halls of government, so that these people that have to vote on these bills are seeing the issues for themselves. In any time that we are trying to digitize logins, sign-ons, credentialing, it's something to be very aware of, because it will undoubtedly be tied to access to funds and healthcare status. We're already seeing that with the Real ID and the unfettered power that it gives to DHS in order to decide what credentials are part of that. And we're also seeing biosurveillance increasing in terms of genetics, which is quite frightening and unfortunate to see that in the United States, in a country that is supposed to be the beacon of freedom, to embrace genetic surveillance at the federal level. So that is something that we are committed to watching and fighting back on. And don't get discouraged, because if they had everything they needed, they wouldn't be asking for more. They don't have it all yet. So it's still worth us showing up to fight these things and help to repeal some of the bad stuff that has gone through.
Yeah, to add to that, the Real ID specifically says in the legislation that passed it that it can be used for any other purpose deemed necessary by the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the plan is, right? But the Idaho Medical Freedom Act and the Medical Freedom Act in general prohibits any kind of discrimination or penalty on people on the basis of using or not using a medical intervention. And so it would prohibit anyone using those, connecting those. And then all this other legislation. Listen, Dr. Cole was incredibly gracious in the way that he portrayed our Congress, our US Congress, in my opinion. I'll be a little bit more straightforward. They are not answering to us. It's so obvious, right? They are not answering to us in many of these things. They're passing the Genius Act. They're working, they're not passing the SAVE Act. They're doing all these things which would require that only citizens can vote, right? So much of what they do is actually antithetical to serving Americans first. It's really awful. It's really disappointing. What's the antidote to that? Action in the states. That's the place where we can flex our muscles. And that's why we created this coalition, so that we could flex our collective muscles to further the cause of medical freedom. And I just think it's the only thing that we can do at this point, because I think for most members of Congress, they're a lost cause. I know that's disappointing, but that doesn't mean that your state is a lost cause. It doesn't mean that this work is a lost cause. It just means that that's where you should focus your energy.
Yeah, I like to joke, if pro is the opposite of con, is Congress the opposite of progress? So I agree. Yeah, to the state level, that's where we fight, is the state level. Absolutely.
And we spend a lot of time fighting bad things in Congress, and we do see wins. So we do win on fighting against some of the bad stuff. So continue using your voice when we need to. But yes, let's not cede any additional power to central authority or to federal authority, but keep public health authority local, so that we have a voice on it.
Yeah, I'll throw in my other joke. Everybody asks me my favorite treatment for parasites all the time. My joke is vote them out.
I love it. It's so good.
It's a very good one.
Well, we'll move over to closing announcements, because we are at that top of the hour. But thank you so much, Leah and Leslie, for joining the show tonight and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom.
And I want to thank them both as well. I know Leslie's got another event to go to. These are amazingly busy women doing amazingly good things, and let's support them in both their organizations, and keep up the great fight, ladies. You guys are just, you're heroes, truly, and we stand with you, and just can't wait to continue to see wins across the state. So keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, you guys. I'm going to hop off.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Dr. Cole, before I move on to our closing announcements, I know you mentioned earlier about your trip to DC, and I also know that we have some photos from it. But if you'd like to share with the audience just some highlights from that trip before I move over to our announcements.
Yeah, this was a great trip. Dr. Mumper, Dr. Verone, and I went to DC. Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of thing. We had the great opportunity of meeting with many House and Senate staffers, and just like all of us, they have health questions. They're regular people like we are, and they get a lot of the influence from big organizations and a lot of lobbying from those large organizations, but they have the wherewithal to think, wait a minute, I'm hearing from the lobby groups. What about the independent groups? And so we had a wonderful opportunity to meet with those staff members from the House and Senate, as well as on some of these trips with the congressional and Senate members. And they're gracious enough to give us their time, and we can bring up the issues that matter to everybody listening here. We did go to HHS. We were able to meet with some of the deputies there and work on communication so that we can help continue to get the message of health freedom out and realize how much of these organizations do have fantastically good people within them who are fighting the fight with us. Yes, they're against a machine that's been entrenched for a long time, but they appreciate what independent groups are doing to get the message of health and wellness forward. So it was a great opportunity to meet with so many good people that are on the side of health freedom, that are trying to get things done from the inside and bring your voice. We're able to bring your voice to them and know that, we represent you. We're all on this team together of freedom. And so being there in DC, yes, it's the belly of the beast, but don't give up hope there either. There are good people doing good things there. And the more we have our voice heard, the more good things we will see happen.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cole. Thank you for your update and encouraging words. I'm sure it's very helpful to our audience. I will switch over to our closing announcements.
Thank you.
All right, I will try to be quick with these. We hope that you will join us next week, Wednesday, February 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern, for a show on therapeutic candidates for measles, what the evidence shows. This episode is going to be hosted by Dr. Joseph Verone. I am a Chief Medical Officer, with guests Dr. Elizabeth Mumper, IMA Senior Fellow and Pediatrician, and Matthew Halma, IMA's Director of Research. He's also a co-author on this study with Dr. Verone. Together, they're going to be discussing this new peer-reviewed research in antiviral research, reviewing promising therapeutic options for measles, including vitamin A and emerging antiviral candidates. You can read the full paper at imahealth.org, but we hope that you will join us next week. As a follow-up to our discussion last week's on our show last week on peptides, IMA has developed a new guide and resource. You can download it. It is called Understanding Peptides: What They Are, How They Work, and Why They Mattered. This guide is created by IMA Senior Fellow, Dr. Christina Carmen, and it is a clinician-friendly resource offering a clear overview of what peptides are, how they function in the body, and common forms of use, key safety concerns, and really how they fit into a holistic health framework. If you've been hearing more about peptides in integrative medicine and you want some evidence-based clarity, this guide is a great place to start. You can download the guide at the link on screen, which is geni.us/understanding peptides, or by checking it out on imahealth.org under tools and guides. This year, April 17th through 18th, we are hosting a medical education conference, Emerging Trends in Medicine, a 2-day gathering dedicated to the latest innovations in research and forward-thinking practices shaping the future of healthcare. And we have great news to announce that the entire conference agenda has been approved for continuing medical education credits, CMEs. So those attending can earn 12.75 CME credits, and the schedule includes 2 sessions on ethics, which is typically a state requirement each year. This event offers a dynamic program of expert-led lectures and networking opportunities. You can get your tickets today while we still have early bird pricing at imahealth.org/conference. IMA is continuing to build the National Trusted Referral Network, connecting patients with independent clinicians vetted for ethical patient-first care. Your support helps fund platform development, provider onboarding, and public access, so patients can finally answer the question that we hear every day: where can I find a doctor that I can trust? You can support this work by donating at imahealth.org/donate. Well, thank you again to Dr. Ryan Cole for hosting tonight's episode, and to Leah Wilson and Leslie Manookian for their leadership and tireless work, and to all of you for being a part of this movement. Before we close, we wanted to share a clip of Dr. Ryan Cole's segment on the National Desk News as he shares how we can strengthen our immune systems. Let's take a look.
A fierce flu season and a dangerous rise in so-called superbug infections making headlines as both spread across the country. So how real are these risks and how can you protect your health without falling for fear and hype? Joining us now to break it all down is Senior Fellow of Pathology at Independent Medical Alliance, Dr. Ryan Cole. Good morning to you, Dr. Cole. Welcome to the National News Desk.
Good morning, Jan. Good to be with you.
The media, as we know, increasingly warning about these so-called superbugs and antibiotic-resistant infections. How real is this threat, and what should Americans, what do they need to know to really understand about what's happening here?
Well, I'd love that you bring up the fact that how real is it? If you look at the statistics, we're in an average flu and cold season right now. So certainly there are risk populations that we see get sick every season, and we're having that happen as usual. The hospitalizations aren't up per se. We are seeing more flu than we are COVID or RSV, and RSV tends to hit the younger population, the babies and the pediatric population. But we're not seeing a bug that has escaped everything that we can do in medicine.
Yeah, a lot of folks really try to boost their immune system during this time. So from an integrative, evidence-based standpoint, what are the biggest mistakes you see and what truly builds that lasting immune resilience?
Well, basic things: moving the body, exercise, sleep, and keeping the stress levels low. And my favorite thing of all, I hyperbolically joke there's really no such thing as flu and cold season, but rather low vitamin D season. And we're in that time of year. Everybody's vitamin D is low unless you're supplementing. And it's very important for the immune system to function properly. It controls about 2,000 of our genes directly or indirectly, and especially our immune system.
We always hear about the importance of vitamin D. How much of when you talk about supplements, how much of it can you actually get from supplements versus sun?
Well, this time of year we can't get any from the sunshine due to the angle of the sun and the rays that produce vitamin D through our skin. So supplementation, if you're basically above Tennessee anywhere north, you need to supplement. And most people, according to the American Endocrinology Association, can take about 4,000 international units daily without even ever getting tested. Some people take more. And so it's very safe to do, and the majority of Americans are low in it this time of year. And then once we hit the springtime, definitely get outside, and that's your best way to get it and for it to last the longest and be most effective.
You've treated COVID, you've treated long COVID. I've read you also treated vaccine-related injuries since 2020. So how do these conditions change a person's risk for respiratory illnesses and also those secondary infections?
Well, that's a great question. We do see a lot more immune suppression within the population, especially in some of those patients, and long COVID or long vaccine injury. So I think those are the individuals that do need to be maybe a little more vigilant in terms of hand washing and exposure and whatnot. But doing the basic things, staying hydrated, the exercise, rest, vitamin D, are things that can at least keep their immune system tuned enough to avoid getting sick this season.
And with so much mixed messaging and these alarming headlines, what principles should really guide patients and physicians this season so that we have these decisions that are really rooted in clarity and not fear?
Yeah, I think taking charge of your own health. A lot of doctors have this systems thought and want you to get certain interventions that may or may not help. We know the flu shot this year is reasonably ineffective. And if one gets a shot this time of year, it would take 3 to 4 weeks before it would even be effective. And that's why supplementing and doing the basics of health are going to keep you tuned better than trying to get a shot this late in the season that doesn't really even cover the variants that are out there.
All right, critical information to cut through all the noise. Dr. Ryan Cole, thank you for your time and sharing your expertise with us this morning.
Thank you, Jan.
For more information on this topic and overall immune health, you can visit imahealth.org.